our sales pitches. Sorry, I moved my thing. And the details on here aren't really what's important. The reason why I'm putting this in here is give you a little bit of sense of how these things kind of come together, but also to point out, a couple key things. When we're working with our clients to implement Salesforce, seldom is it just implementing Salesforce. Most of what we're doing and the complex work that goes into it is integrating Salesforce with other systems. So there's a couple things that just happen automatically. If you're using Gmail or Outlook, you automatically get integration with Salesforce.com. But and again, the BlackBerry and the iPhone, that sort of stuff just comes out of the box. This is a particular client that does. They basically do alternative investment management for very, very wealthy people. And this is nothing but they do effectively short trades in the stock market with rich people's sort of betting money, right? So people with a certain amount of money kind of spread that around and place their bets in different places. They work with a company like this to do sort of risky bets. And that's the only type of work that this company does. So what they're using Salesforce for is to manage their client portfolio. Before Salesforce, all they have are the list of the financial accounts that money is going in and coming out of whenever they put bets into the stock market, right? They didn't have a good view of who are the holders of these financial accounts. They just see, Brennan's, in this scenario, this doesn't really apply, but you could think of Brennan's retirement account or Brennan's college savings fund for his kids or something like that. But they didn't have a good picture of Brennan and the holistic picture of Brennan. So that's where Salesforce comes into play for this particular client. They're using it for the end user, their actual money managers, who are the ones facing off to the client and making these investment decisions, are really experiencing Salesforce. That the only thing that they log into, everything that they think that they are using is Salesforce.com. But behind the scenes, they're connecting a lot of times to this very, 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 very complex SQL database that has a huge amount of data in it and doing some pretty sophisticated reporting off the top of it. Whenever they execute a trade, that's actually coming out of what's here, the order management system in this SQL database. So the key point in that respect for this slide is Salesforce doesn't pretend or try to do everything. It's about integrating Salesforce at the right time with the right systems to get a holistic solution, right? And another thing, this particular company clears all their trades through JP Morgan. So JP Morgan isn't even really involved in this whole project other than the fact that they receive data from this client whenever they want to execute trades. So what we're doing is simply building a feed from Salesforce.com to JP Morgan, so all that data transfer is seamless, right? So again, the specifics about this, not really what's terribly interesting. It's just about how Salesforce is typically one component of an overall solution, but from an end user standpoint, it's really what they experience, right? So at this point in time, when I say Salesforce was a Rolodex on steroids, if you don't have access to your address book and you don't have your friend's email address or your phone number, that's a big inconvenience, but it's something you can kind of survive a day without. If you didn't have access and you were a stock trader to your trading system, that's more than an inconvenience. Your business shuts down, right? So before, when Salesforce was just a Rolodex, it wasn't mission critical. Now, as we're architecting solutions like this, it actually is becoming mission critical. Okay, a lot of words in this slide. So again, this was from that same exact proposal. And the only reason I'm presenting this is just because it gives you a sense of the types of benefits that Salesforce are providing our clients. So it obviously comes right out of the box with the industry-leading contact management capabilities. It allows our customers to have standardized process for all of their employees, wherever their employees happen to be or whatever their employees happen to do. And that is a big problem in any company, regardless of what they're trying to do. It allows companies that may be small and may all be one location to actually collaborate more effectively with each other. Because even if you're sitting all in the same room, you're sometimes not always on the same page. For these guys, what was very, very important in the way we thought through this particular proposal was we needed to make sure that we're not trying to rebuild things that don't need to be rebuilt. If it works and it doesn't need to be retired, we're going to leverage it, right? At some point in time, we may decide we're going to retire it because we can go to a better, more optimized solution. But there was no reason, at least in the first phase, to try to get rid of everything all at once. And that's another thing for us and why we like Salesforce is it very much allows for iterative implementation lifecycle. So you don't have to do everything all in one big bag. One hugely complex, hugely risky, and terribly long project to solve a problem. You can do it in smaller chunks. It's not agile, if you guys have been learning about agile per se. What it is, it's sort of really accelerated waterfall, if you will. The other big thing, I kind of hit sort of this, and then even on this one, providing a foundation for growth. Whatever we do, whenever we're designing, we're always thinking about what they might want to do down the road. We don't always know what they're going to want to do, but there's certain things we can see are on the horizon. They're not ready to address yet, and where we can see those things, we want to make sure we're not designing something that will be limiting in their options in the future. Okay. Now, here I would just want to spend a couple minutes. When I say financial services is a really, really broad range. There's a lot of different sub-verticals within financial services. So I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about the different sub-verticals that we deal in and some of the things that our clients are using Salesforce for. So the first one, commercial lending. So these would be companies that basically loan to other companies who want to buy an apartment building or something like that. Similar sort of process to you going and getting a home mortgage, but a lot more complex in certain ways. If you are a company that's trying to, add to your portfolio, even Donald Trump has to go get loans when he wants to build a building, right? So he's going to a commercial lending organization to get this sort of stuff. So they have a terribly, terribly complex business process. So the easy part is finding people who want to borrow money. The hard part is making sure that they're qualified to borrow that money, make sure that that property business plan is sound and will actually generate money enough to pay back the loan. And that's terribly, 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 terribly complex. So we're building very complex solutions way past just the Rolodex thing for these commercial lending organizations. Venture capital I had already talked about a little bit. Again, these are the companies that are out there really to do nothing more than to find that next Facebook or that next anything that you can name, and to profit from that, quite candidly. So they provide funding for startups to go to the next stage of their own evolution. And they do that by meeting with a lot of companies and hearing a lot of ideas and hearing a lot of pitches. And so they're using Salesforce to manage those network of people that they're meeting with, the companies that are pitching to them, qualifying those as potential investments, and then moving it through the entire process of actually providing the funding, investing in a company, and then managing their portfolio reporting after they place their investments. Commercial real estate, not totally separate from what's up above, but these are companies that manage massive portfolios of apartment buildings, or office spaces or whatever it happens to be, and they're using Salesforce to actually manage their book of business, the properties that they hold, trying to link buyers and sellers, trying to link, manage the leases that go into these things, and then also they oftentimes bundle these things up in securities that they sell on the market, so they're using Salesforce for some of that securitization and asset management. Insurance. Now this is an easier one probably to grasp. But this is literally you going out and getting car insurance, right, or home insurance or something like that. You can obviously go to Geico, but there's a whole bunch of small independent insurance agents that are out there. Salesforce is awesome for these guys because it doesn't require them to have an IT staff. It doesn't require them to run servers. They can just go to Salesforce and buy a license. And they're using it to really manage their client relationships. They're also using it every time your house floods to process those claims. You're calling in to say, hey, I need to get money out of this. But they do have very complex processes around getting quotes and underwriting the insurance policies that you get from them. They're often using different systems to get those quotes. If you go to an insurance agent, even a State Farm person down the road, they're not often selling you a State Farm product. They're selling you a product from another insurance provider. And so they're going to these systems that aggregate quotes, even that you could do like for yourself on Progressive to see comparative quotes. So they're using Salesforce for that sort of integration. And then the last one, wealth management. And this is, in itself, very broad-ranging. But you can think of this as, in one area, as the financial advisors that hopefully everybody in here will eventually have enough money to use to manage their money for them. So this is another area. Many of these financial advisors are small companies themselves. Again, they don't want IT people working for them. They don't want servers in their offices. They want to use a hosted solution that they just pay a monthly fee for. This is the area that I was talking to before with TD Ameritrade and LPL, two massive clients of ours, that they provide sort of the back office services on the trading and execution of management of your portfolio for independent financial advisor offices. So an independent financial advisor has a client wants to invest X amount of dollars into a particular stock. That financial advisor isn't going to the New York Stock Exchange to actually execute that trade. They're using a company like TD Ameritrade, like LPL, like Fidelity, like Schwab to actually execute that trade. They're placing the order. It all is processed by those large companies. These large companies are actually trying to provide more valuable services to their financial advisors who use their services. So they're building their own products on Salesforce.com for their advisors to manage client relationships and then have automatic integrations with TD Ameritrade's own internal systems. So this is sort of a unique situation where we're building a solution on Salesforce not for our client, who is LPL or TD Ameritrade. We're building it for LPL or TD Ameritrade to resell to their clients. Okay, so this is a pretty interesting space because those two companies are hugely competitive with each other. They both know we work with both of them, but it's a very sort of symbiotic network. It's kind of like they're looking for the best solutions and the best way to get those solutions. Everybody, all those companies, Schwab, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, LPL, they're all trying to do the same sort of thing. And it's a very sort of competitive but tightly knit environment. Any questions on any of that sort of stuff? Yeah? Yeah. That's so the question is, did we use a venture capitalist? Redkite is actually totally self-funded. So, and I'm going to shift, I think, next into, so it's a good segue, building the company. But a consulting firm relative to a lot of other things that we could have chosen to do is relatively easy to start self-funded, right? All you have to worry about is finding that first project to pay yourself, and then you have to find the second project to pay the next person you bring in, and you have to find the third project to pay the person after that. So it's stressful, but you don't need to start with $10 million in the bank. Right? I'm actually going to skip this slide because I think I've talked a lot to this sort of stuff. And so what I wanted to do in talking about my experience in building out Redkite was, I got a little retrospective in looking back. This forced me to think about the last 4 years. Start with, what did we set out to do? What were some of the things that we wanted to focus on in creating the company in the first place? And then 4 years later, how have we done against those? And then I have just sort of a couple, things, regardless of whether you're interested in starting your own company. At some point, you will be interested in your own career, and things that I have found sort of as common threads as I've seen other people who have been successful in their career have been interesting to me. Before I go, does anybody have any other general questions? Is anybody here, everybody here potentially, I don't know, anybody thinking at some point in their career they would like to have their own company? Okay. So maybe this is just for the four of you. But for me, at least, I always knew I wanted to have my own company. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to have my own company. And when I was younger, I played drums growing up, played in a band while I was at Penn State. I thought maybe I want to own a music store, right? And then I was like, okay, well, I like beer. Maybe I want to own a bar. I don't know. I just want to own something, right? So I never knew what it was, and it was like through every step of my career, things started to take shape a little bit, and eventually it just kind of came, hey, I'm kind of good at this. Maybe I should just try it, right? So I took, at times when I left JP Morgan to go to O'Carey, I had a really nice role at JP Morgan. I had a really nice paycheck. I had a really good network of people. But I knew eventually I wanted to be entrepreneurial. And to go to O'Carey was a big risk because it was a startup. But it wasn't a tremendous risk because I wasn't putting any money into it. I was sacrificing on pay, but I was doing it also with 5 other guys who were also in it together. So it was sort of my first step. In starting Redkite, we had just been acquired. I had a really good job. I had a really good paycheck, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I had, a moment I just didn't want to do this anymore, and I quit, and I had no idea what I was going to do next. And I had a very understanding wife who let me do that, and I took 6 months to figure it out. I had made a little bit of money when we were acquired, but certainly not enough that I was about ready to go sit on a beach for any length of time. But it sort of forced me out of my comfort zone and to really make a decision on what I wanted to do next. I thought, I still do. That and the bar, actually. So what did we want to do in starting Redkite? And, the experience in building out the last company significantly shaped what I wanted to do with Redkite. And when we started the last company with the intent of building something as big as we possibly could build it so we could sell it within 3 to 5 years, right? And that it's a goal. And a lot of people start companies with that sort of goal in mind. And what happened was in 3.5 years, 5 people of the management team, the early people in, totally checked out. And they just started to say, where's the payday? I want my money. I want to cash out now. I was the guy who was at the client site trying to deliver and convince the client that we were as good as they thought we were when they first hired us, and I didn't have an executive team to support me out there. So I didn't want to repeat that mistake in starting Redkite. So we definitely said in starting Redkite, it's not about the money. We're not doing this so we can build something just to grow it, just to sell it. And so what that left us with was we want to do something that we like. And we want to do this for a long time. And we want longevity with it. And we want to like the people that we work with. So I hope at some point I don't worry about money or think about it. And I don't need to work, but I want to work. So that's been a big part in us building out the company, our thought process and the decisions that we make, the people that we want to hire and work with. And then the other really, really critical thing for me as an individual, I wanted to always, 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 always be learning. Regardless of what I'm doing, I want to learn. And if nothing else, starting Redkite was like a huge lesson in itself. Everything that it takes to build a company. Being able to figure out how do you provide benefits to your employees? How do you set up a 401k? Does it make sense to do a match in your 401k or not? Like that has nothing to do with what we do as a company, the services we provide to our clients. But it was totally new to me and something that I'm still continuing to learn. The other thing also with consulting, the reason why I didn't really know what consulting was before I got into it, but not very long after I started into it, you never stop learning because you're always meeting with clients. Something's similar to what you've heard before, but there's always something new that you've never faced before. And they're hiring you as an expert. You might be the first time dealing with this particular problem, so it is a little bit of a weird thing, but you're able to adapt the things that you have learned in your past to the problem that you're hearing now to come up with the answer. So now, if I look back in those 4 years later across those bullet points, I was just going through this weekend thinking about, well, how did we do? So if the first goal was to not be obsessed with money and not worry about money, well, we nailed that goal. So the reality is, for me, I don't mean to sound like, hey, I don't care about money and very blasé or whatever. What I really more was thinking about is if you're passionate about what you do and you produce something that you're proud of and you have fun while you're doing it, the money will eventually take care of itself, right? And so I didn't want to be obsessed and chase these decisions. In consulting, there is a bit of an inherent conflict in being too driven by money and providing the right advice to the client. Because sometimes, if you're more focused on the money, you're recommending the more expensive solution where you could solve the same problem with a much cheaper option. We believe if you go down that path, if it's still going to solve that problem but cost the client less, well, yeah, you're not going to make as much money on that project, but that's going to leave more money for more interesting things that client's going to want to do later. or it's going to be a happier client who's going to refer you to another client, and that sort of stuff. So that's sort of that, things will sort itself out. Now, for people who are thinking about starting a business, at some point before you do it, you will do some form of a financial model. It may not be that sophisticated. It might be terribly sophisticated. But at some point in time, you're going to come to a place where you're going to get an equation that looks like this. And if I put in this much time and this much investment, I will get this return. Investment could be your own effort. It could be your own dollars. It could be somebody else's dollars. It doesn't matter what that investment is. It could be all of those things. But at some point, you're going to justify starting the business by working out an equation that looks like this. Now, if you get to that point, the one thing that I would absolutely suggest is to challenge yourself to not look at it like this, but to look at it like this. And if you put in twice the amount of time and twice the amount of effort, and you get half the return, will you still be happy? Is that still a good decision? And it may not be, and it may not be a requirement. But if you can do it that way, you probably actually will make it, and you probably will be successful, because it always does take a lot more than you ever will guess that it would possibly take when you first start out. Now, the other, I've combined the second and the third one, like what we do and who we're doing it with. And this was really that sort of driver. If I'm going to do something for a really, really long time, what we do is not that, we're not building Facebook 2.0. This is not terribly sexy stuff that we do. So we have to have fun while we're doing it, right? So the one thing I'll say in this area, there is always something to lose sleep about. So yeah, I like what I do, but there's always something that's wrong. There's always a project that's off the rails. There's always a deal we're about to lose. There's always an employee who's unhappy, or a vacation that I'm going to have to cancel because I got to solve something, right? So there's always something to lose sleep about. Now, for this particular area, though, what I've come to realize is I can't solve every single problem by myself. And so I always thought I did have to before, but I've come to realize quickly it's not possible. So I've been able to build a team of people that are all experts at what they do, and I've learned very much to rely on them and not try to solve everything for myself. So the upside to losing sleep is that it's impossible to be bored. And I talked about this a little bit. The nature of what we do in consulting, it's impossible to be bored. The fact that we are a startup, I get to do everything. Like, I can get my hands involved in every aspect of the business. I can actually train end users when we're doing a rollout. I can design the holiday card. Like, I can do everything in the whole entire company. And I like that flexibility. The other thing, not just for me, but for all of our employees, they could go to much larger consulting firms, and they could get totally different experiences. The things that I know I can offer them that they can't get from a PwC is exposure to things in every facet of our business, and immediate access to the most senior people that we deal with from our client standpoint. Whatever they want to raise their hand and say, I'm interested in doing that, they can get that option, as opposed to a larger organization where you have to do this for X number of years, then you can do this, then you can do this, then you can do this. Right? That's about the only way that I can compete when trying to recruit top talent from a Big 5 or Big 4, whatever it happens to be, consulting firm. Now, the working with friends thing is interesting. I have brought in, started with my co-founder, who I'd worked with for years before at JP Morgan, very, very good friend. And we did bring in quickly to the management team other people that we had worked with in the past that we really always enjoyed working with. We've hired a lot of new people we've never known before, totally outside of our network. So I've got even broader network, new friends that I would consider. The interesting aspect to this, though, and the question mark comes from, I've made this realization this year as we've been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm now no longer privy to a lot of the gossip and stuff like that. So it was like, it's a bit of a change, because now in some people's mind, I am the boss, although we have a very, very flat hierarchy and organization structure. So that one's, yeah, it's fun to go to work every day and to be with the people that we be with, but it's a bit different than it used to be. Now, the continuous learning aspect. So this is tied back to some of the things that I was talking about before. We want to make sure that it's not just me who's learning or other members of the management team. We are very focused, and the big part of our management team's drive this year in 2013 is to make sure we're growing everybody. And you will learn as a consultant in our firm certain things quicker than you would learn if you were in a very specific role at a very specific level at a big consulting firm. But the things that we don't inherently provide are the formal structured training, things that you can get at a company like JP Morgan or Ernst & Young. So we're trying to make sure we invest in that sort of stuff and giving people access to the same sorts of things that they would get if they had gone somewhere else. The other thing, as far as learning, I've had lots of things that I've been sort of picking up in the past couple of years. But this year, one of the things that we're wrestling with, and I'm learning a lot about this year, is what is a startup? And we ask this question a lot. We're trying to continue to be an environment. We work in this old photography studio. There's no walls. It's a big open loft. We like it that way. We can collaborate with each other. Everybody can get into solving problems at a whiteboard very quickly and easily. We don't have titles. We don't have career progressions formally or anything like that. But that said, we're at a size now where we have to mature a little bit. So we want to mature and put the process in place that we need just to operate a company, but not kill the startup feeling. So we continually are asking ourselves, what is a startup? And we're learning by trying to look at other companies that are startups, but they're not. Like Google's a startup, right? If you think about what makes a startup appealing, you think about companies like that, they're nowhere near startups. And what I was exposed to at Ernst & Young, what I was exposed to at JP Morgan, that's not the only way to do it. That's not the only way to grow your people, to get the results that you want. And I'm trying to force myself out of what I'm familiar with into a very new area. And it all kind of comes back to this question that we keep asking. Now, one of the other things that has been an interesting sort of learning point is to acknowledge that you don't always have the right answer and to know when it's not working. And this has happened in a couple areas. One of these App Exchange products that I was talking about that we published out there, we think it's great, but the market isn't really reacting positively to it. So we're having this conversation, do we just pull it? Just because you think it's really good, and technically speaking, it might be awesome. You have to acknowledge if the market's speaking and they're not really as excited about it as you are. But this isn't limited to just that sort of stuff. Projects, when is it time to just say, this client, it's not worth us continuing to go after this particular client or this particular project, or we're trying to solve the problem the wrong way. The other very, very tough thing for me in building the company is sometimes this actually applies to employees. And there are those unfortunate situations where this is not the right fit. And you have to make some really, really tough decisions in that case. So these are the sorts of things that, there's slides and slides and slides I could have written about all the other things that I've picked up over the last 4 years. But these are sort of the things that are, most pressing in my head right now as we're thinking about sort of that next stage in our evolution. Any questions with anything? I've got, I think, just one more slide. I don't know if there's any questions on anything I've just gone through here. No? So these are just sort of generic thoughts. And to me, these do not have anything to do with whether or not you want to start your own company. But maybe will be somewhat useful for you. The first is to not limit yourself to the defined expectations. And this, I've seen, the most successful people, and we see a lot of people because we're consultants and we're in and out of a lot of different firms. I've met a lot of people in my career. The people who've been most successful are the ones who haven't said, hey, my title and my role, I'm supposed to do this for 2 years, and then I can be promoted to my manager's title and his role, and then I can do that for 2 years, and then I can be promoted to the next level. That doesn't work. It doesn't fit. Like, don't constrain yourselves. Learn about all the things that you could be doing. Figure out what you think you can do, even if you've not done it before, and just raise your hand and do it. And that's true whether you're going into an internship, whether you're going into your first job, whether you're in 5 years into your career or 15 years into your career. Those are the people who are going to be most successful in what they do. Now, this one is another thing that I've learned a lot this, with Redkite is luck exists, and it's not always in your favor. When it is, be very, very thankful for it. But when it's not, don't just lie back and say, hey, it was outside of my control. Figure out what to do next. And then I think just one more. Then I'll end on probably what will be the biggest cliche you'll hear this week. But just because it's a cliche doesn't mean it's not true.